Hey everyone, Build 31 has dropped. It's the final early access build for Grim Dawn. It has a massive changelog that I'm actually going to look at before we hop in the game today to look at the new old Arcavia stuff and to sort of talk about what the game is right now. And early access ends on Thursday, which means Grim Dawn's going to officially be released, or released, depending on how you look at it, this week. In 2 days, which is pretty awesome. Before I actually read the changelog down here, I want to point out that I will be doing an official, I guess, in-depth replay through of the game from the beginning and just go over everything for beginners and for novices and for experts and for masters of Grim Dawn to go through the game with a new character from the beginning, look at all the new stuff, and really make it like a really good in-depth playthrough. Because the old in-depth playthrough, I was thinking about it the other day while I was recording my Phantasmal Blades thing. The old in-depth playthrough is really, really out of date. So, yeah, we gotta get an update for that thing, because man, is it old. And, that's gonna start to be posted. I'm going to be using build 31 for it initially because it's basically the release version of the game. And that's going to start on Thursday and continue on hopefully through all of the game and maybe even through Elite and Ultimate. But this video, we're going to go over the patch notes and the build notes, and we're going to go into the game and look at the new versions of old Arcavia and how that area works. So first things first, the new major features. There is a new introduction in the game, a new intro video, and there's voice acting for all of the major NPC dialogues in the game. That's part of the reason I want to go into a new in-depth playthrough. But that's a huge change, and I saw a little bit of it last night in Sino's stream, and it looks pretty good. Sounds pretty good too. So, the second big new thing, is the second bullet point. A major earthquake has erupted in the land of old Arcavia. Mountains collapsed into the world's crust. New rivers formed. Ancient ruins were revealed. Players who previously explored this region may need to rediscover the Twin Falls Rift Gate. I had to do that last night because I was very confused about how old Arcavia is set up now, because they completely reworked how you move through it. And it's a big enough change that it actually confused me, because I was so used to the way it was, and the new way it is a really new way of how it's set up. And we'll look at that in the video later on. So yeah, animated cinematic that introduces the new characters to the world of Grim Dawn. And they added in a tutorial tip system, and they merged the old tutorial window into the quest dialogue window. So, some new art things. They updated some stuff. Looks like Mortar Trap and the Hellhound got visual updates. And they showed the Hellhound in the Grim Misadventures. And I may go out of my way to show it today. And I may show off the new replacement for Lethal Gambit today. We'll see about that. Added new beech tree assets used in Burwich Outskirts, Burwich Village, and the East Marsh. Oh, okay. New trees are in those areas. Oh yeah, another new change that's a very tiny change is medals are now actually on your character's breast. So, I noticed this with my battle mage, that he actually had the medal for Combat Medic's Mark on his chest. It's a cool little addition. You don't usually see tiny things like rings and amulets and stuff and belts added to a character, but they're adding the medals in. They aren't adding rings, amulets, or belts, but they do have the medals on the characters now. And like I mentioned, old Arcavia is now, I guess, new old Arcavia, at least for today, because it's going to just be old Arcavia from now on, but I'm going to refer to it as new old Arcavia for the time being. So animations. I haven't looked at the new two-hand weapon default attack animation, but the new devastation is really awesome. I really love the way it works now. It's just a constant bombardment for 5 seconds instead of like waves. And it's awesome. So let's see. Some bug fixes for stuff. Nothing too crazy there. So they fixed a bunch of like miscellaneous issues. I don't see enemy death autocast will now trigger off duration damage. That's good. Total armor rating now displays normalized armor rating that takes into account each chance to hit each armor area. Fixed celestial powers attached to pets not using the appropriate level for some instances. This is all pretty normal looking, like tweaky stuff. Okay, it's all like little improvements to things. I'm not seeing any. Oh, I think one of the big new things is there's now going to be main hand for skills that take into account your weapon damage. There's now main hand damage and offhand damage. So like force wave with a shield is offhand damage. With like cadence, it'll say main hand damage. So main hand offhand is now taken into account when they display things. Game move to no longer targets breakable objects. Okay, so first time you find secret areas have improved loot. The first time you discover them on a character per difficulty, which is really nice. Too bad all the characters I play with have gone through them all. Reduce the potency on Log Hearn's Void Rifts. I like the sound of that. I still haven't fought the Avatar of Mogdragon. I plan to do that as its own independent video very soon. I have to actually just go and force myself to do it. He's basically like a one-time nemesis spawn in terms of his power, but it looks like they slightly toned him down a bit. Fabius, reduce the heal of his pneumatic burst. Thank you. Added a small flat heal to compensate at lower levels. This heal was scaling too extremely on ultimate difficulty, making a counter too drawn out. More like making it impossible for most people to do. In addition, the attack speed bonus from pneumatic burst has been reduced by 10%. So they very much gave Fabius a big nerf, which I can get behind. I still don't know if I have any character that could actually take him on, though. See, Nemesis. Various Nemesis self-buff effects no longer susceptible to dispel. Bite me. Remove some of the more obscure spawn locations for Ethereal and Chthonian Nemesis. That's good. That means you can go to more common places to get them. Fix the bug where three of them wouldn't spawn. Change multiplayer experience poses only ever. Multiplayer level players. Okay, here's a new one that I'm pretty interested in. The Locksmere Night Mage now has a chance to spawn in a fixed location that can be avoided by players who do not wish to contend with the nightmarish possessed, rather than randomly in unavoidable locations. Awesome. Because, like, that bridge in, say, Asterkarn, where he liked to show up a lot, not going to be there anymore. That, like, path into Fort Icon that he showed up a lot in, not going to be there anymore. So it's going to make going through the game a little easier and less frightening. But at the same time, this wasn't frightening in terms of, oh, man, I hope I don't die to hordes of monsters, or, oh, I don't know what's coming up next. It's like, I know where Locksmere is. I know where he can kill me. And it's not going to be fun. Now they just moved him to his own fixed location. I don't actually know where, though. Anyways, however, you do have a chance, for those who do brave a conflict with the Night Mage, he now has a chance to drop a monster infrequent item when you beat him. It's a dagger. I don't know what it does or what it looks like yet. So it may be a great thing to farm up to get a good one. We'll see. It's a caster weapon, obviously. I would assume it might be an Aether weapon. Just a wild guess. It might not. Could be a cold weapon, could be cold aether. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Okay, so he also has another note. Reduce the burst potential and high-level scaling on the Locksmere Night Mage. In addition, this boss is now less likely to open up with a Shadow Strike, which was, I think, one of the biggest issues with him before, was he would just be there, and then he'd immediately pounce on you, and you'd just be dead. Or he'd pounce on you and stun you, then hit you with his nullification. All your stats and energy's gone, and then he'd pounce on you again. Let's see. The Outcast now has a chance to drop a legendary version of her unique hood at level 80+, and an increased chance to drop the epic version with each tier of her hostile status. So I love that hood, and I can't wait to see the legendary version of it, because I think it's going to go on both of my Aether Ray guys. Okay, fix the bug of spawning necrop, whatever. Reduce % current life resist. Okay, so % current life resistance. So I think those are those abilities that say like % chance to reduce enemy life. So they lowered that on heroes and bosses. Threat generation is updated. Debuff effects and damage over time now only generate threat on their initial application. Rapidly attacking a target now generates reduced threat, reducing the amount of threat transferred from pets to the summoner. Oh, reduce the amount of threat generated from pets. Threat transferred from pets to summoner. Increase the cooldown at which certain mobs and bosses will attempt to ignore threats. So that's some balancing on how pets threaten things. And I'll point out some things when we get to classes. Classes down below that they're just tweaking the way the pets are done. Generate threat and stuff. The next chapter of the story revolving around the blade Stormheart and its owner awaits. What the heck is that? Steps to Torment Exit Monolith now is only active after you open the main loot chest. Target dummies. This is going to be a fun one. Target dummies have been added to Devil's Crossing Homestead and Fort Icon. Transparency setting adjust. Jackson Act 2. Bounties asked for trivial materials have been removed from the rotation. Whatever. So itemization's actually like down, like they have a whole post for it. So classes. Damage over time effects can now critically strike and trigger on crit effects. That's huge, because that means like Dreeg's Evil Eye and poison damage and burns and frost burns will now crit, and they can trigger things like, say, Blizzard. That's going to be big for certain builds, and it's not going to affect other builds at all. So, like, I can definitely see Dreeg's Evil Eye becoming really stupid powerful. I don't know that I'd say it would up the Occultist in the tier list I have in my head over Strength, but we shall see. I have that Witch Hunter who's pretty much based around Poison and Acid and Dots. We'll see what happens with him in the near future. I actually have to play him, though. I've kind of been waiting for this build update to do an update for that character. On enemy death effects now trigger from damage over time effects. So, like, say, Raise the Dead from the Revenant Constellation, you can now hit with dots, and it will trigger them, which is excellent. So, Devotion has a huge list of changes here. And I don't know that I need to go over all of them, since you can go and view the changelog yourself. There have been a couple, like, weird... I don't know why they would... there are a couple weird ones. Like, where is it? Light of the Empyrean. So, Light of the Empyrean, they nerfed it. They nerfed the whole constellation in the ability. And I don't know why. Because, like, my only note on this is they did a lot where they added certain things to certain things to abilities in the constellations, and they tweaked a lot of things. But sort of the problem with Devotion right now is there's no reason to go and grab up third-tier Devotion trees, like Devotion constellations. The big thing with Devotion you use it for, at least what I use it for, is shoring up my defenses and, like, picking up some early things that sort of mesh well with whatever build I'm using. So, like, with my Albrecht's Aether Ray guy, I'll point out two of the changes here. Aether Fire added some fire damage and a chance to confuse for 2 seconds. So they made Aether Fire, and they made it better. Because it adds a little more fire damage and has this 33% chance to confuse targets for 2 seconds. Which is awesome. And an Arcane Bomb here. Activation chance increased to 25%, which is awesome. Cooldown is increased to 2 seconds. That's not as awesome, but whatever. The explosion now applies a debuff that deals Aether Lightning damage and reduces resistance to those damage types for 4 seconds. 33% at max rank, which is awesome. Now it reduces offensive ability instead of stunning, because the stun was basically pointless on that thing in all honesty. And the explosion radius was increased to 5 from, like, what was it? I think it was like 2 or 3 or something tiny like that. Might have been 4. I don't exactly remember because I stopped using it. But I'm using it again. So some things like that got changed to be better, and some things got changed to be, like, toned down a bit. Like, Acid Spray, they reduced the resistance reduction. Because everyone would go to it, because it's a great ability. But, I mean, now Arcane Bomb exists for Aether characters, so you just use that. Aether and Lightning now, technically, characters. So, that's a huge upgrade for an Aether Ray character, or Kalidor's Tempest character, even. Or just if you want those abilities worked in, because, I mean, it's just really good now for Aether Lightning. But those are low-end abilities. And I don't really think I've seen enough buffs to the high-end abilities, the tier 3 things, like, whatever Light of the Empyreans thing is called. Light of the Empyrean, actually. It's like, they reduced the weapon damage to 35%. So it's like they nerfed Light of the Empyrean, making it less attractive to pick up. And it's sort of like, yeah, the problem with just third-tier devotion trees is they're not worth going for, really. When you can just shore up all your defenses and shore up your damages with the low-end stuff, and you're fine. Anyways, yeah, I just think it's only, like, they made it better, but they didn't make high-end things high-end to me. That's just my opinion, though. I'm sure people feel differently about it. I think the changes are fine because it's mostly buffs, but it's still, like, they didn't fix what I think is the main problem with devotion, and that's third-tier constellations are just they're just not worth picking up, in all honesty. I think third-tier constellations should be, like, level 40 to 50 skills. Something like, if you look at, like, what Devastation is now, it's devastating. Light of the Empyrean should be about that level. Maybe a little less because it's a freebie and you're not using skill points for it. But, you know, like, there has to be something that really justifies investing into those. And only, like, I think it's Ulzin's Flame is the only one that is really, like, whoa! So, all the others are just like, okay. They're small bonuses to me compared to what you can get out of just spreading your devotion points into defensive things to keep yourself alive while relying on your normal abilities for offense. But that's enough of my editorializing devotion. Class changes. The Soldier. Fighting form. Percent crit damage removed. Percent physical and bleed damage scaling increased. Added the chance to pierce through enemies when using with a ranged weapon. So that's on Cadence. So when Cadence procs, that percent crit damage is gone, which is not as good. Physical bleed damage was increased, and then chance to pierce with ranged weapon. I'd probably say it's a tiny nerf to that ability. Fighting Spirit, ranks reduced from a maximum of 16 to 12, so that less investment is required. Surplus points can be reclaimed. Percent crit damage has been removed, nerf. Percent offensive ability converted to flat ability, nerf. Percent all damage boosted significantly, buff. Chance to activate starts lower, scales higher. I guess that's a buff. So Fighting Spirit, I guess it's just balanced now. Just balanced out with what it lost, what it gained. Blitz now pushes through enemies, which is awesome. Blindside, percent physical damage increased. Defense ability reduction increased. So Blitz and Blindside got a buff. Mainer's Will duration back up to 10 seconds. Ultimate rank cooldown raised to 15 seconds. While rank 16 cooldown remains unchanged. So I think this is like, I've never used Mainer's Will. I don't know if it's a buff or a nerf, but whatever. Shield training, reduced percent shield block recovery by 20% at rank 10, 30% by max ultimate. This bonus is partially moved to the Shield Maiden Constellation Devotion. So let's go up to Shield Maiden. Added 15% block recovery, reduced chance of retaliation to 15%. So yeah, they just made it so that, like, if you're using a shield-based build, you're pretty much going for the Shield Maiden, and it's like, that's an equaling out. That's just a balance of that. I'd probably say the soldier got a tiny, tiny nerf overall. Not anything major, though. Flashbang, radius and defensive ability reduction scaling increased. Granado, damage scaling increased. High impact, fire damage scaling increased. Vindictive Flame, defensive ability replaced with total speed. Flame Touch, added offensive ability. Yeah, that's a big, big addition. It's flat offensive ability. I think that's awesome. Mortar Trap, now cast directly at the cursor, same way Shaman Totems are. That's awesome. No longer do you have to throw it out and wait like the 10 seconds for it to turn on and start firing things. Projectile overhauled to be more responsive and awesome. Cooldown reduced to 5 seconds. That's a pretty big buff for Mortar Trap. High Potency, updated the percent total damage modifier, or updated with a percent total damage modifier, which is awesome. Thermite Mine, fear effect removed. Great. That's perfect. That's exactly what that thing needed, actually. Mines now reduce fire and lightning resistance on affected enemies. Damage slightly reduced to compensate for the resist reduction, but this is an overall net buff to their damage. Multiple Thermite Mines no longer stack their damage on the same target. I'd probably say that's technically a buff, because reducing fire and lightning, I don't actually use Thermite Mines a lot. I have a character I was trying them out on, but wasn't blown away by how they worked, and this might actually make me go back to them. But it's weird that it actually has a lightning resist reduction on it, because they don't use lightning resist. They don't target lightning anymore, because Lightning Arc is now renamed to Hellfire Mine. Now deals chaos damage and reduces chaos resistance instead of lightning damage. Percent fire damage reduced, added percent burn damage. Items that previously had a bonus to Lightning Arc that are lightning based have their skill bonuses replaced. So something's Lightning Arc based, it's either going to be switched to Hellfire Mine or just dropped altogether or switched to something else. That's going to be interesting, because that's sort of what happens with the Demolitionist in its high-end stuff. It kind of picks up a lot of chaos damage, at least from what I can tell. I don't go into high-end Demolitionists, really, with any character. Yeah, Demolitionist got a nice buff. That's a very, very nice improvement to the class as a whole. I'm not blown away by Vindictive Flame's replacement, because I was actually using that defensive ability with my Aether Ray guy, and I'm going to respec all the points out of it now. But all in all, Demolitionist got a buff. Got a definite improvement. As did the Occultist. So, Sigil of Destruction cooldown reduced from 3.5 seconds to 3 seconds, which is awesome. Possession. Percent damage absorption increased from 10 to 12 at max. 16% at max ultimate rank. Awesome. Disruption resistance now starts at 100% with no scaling. I think what happened was it was at like 100%, and it actually got more than that. Now I think you just get a flat 100% disruption resistance, and that's that. Because the disruption resistance, I think it's like if you're disrupted, it would be you have it or something, whatever. I've never paid attention to skill disruption protections. Added flat chaos damage and percent chaos resistance. I think they just mean flat chaos damage, because I think it had chaos resistance before, or they increased the amount of chaos resistance on it. Significantly increased the scaling. Okay, this is what I wanted to mention before with the pet balancing. Significantly increased the threat scaling with rank generated by Ember Claw. So Ember Claw and Ground Stomp, they sort of were like the pet's ability to, when they use those abilities, like swiped or ground stomped, they would act as sort of a taunt to pull enemies on them, and this just makes that work better. But their overall, like, I think the overall, like, threat generated by pets was tweaked to balance that out. Anyways, I'd still say that it's a buff to that concept, though, for the pets. Blood of Dreeg, increased duration, raised health, raised percent heal scaling, added offensive ability, replaced percent acid damage with flat acid damage, huge buff to Blood of Dreeg. Armor of the Guardian is renamed to Aspect of the Guardian, armor replaced with physical resist. Added percent vitality and poison damage, removed percent attack speed. Huge bonus to that. Huge buff to that. Blood of Dreeg. If you got an Occultist, you're probably going to want to use it like Pneumatic Burst now, where you just want it up as much as possible. Use it all the time. Awesome buff to Blood of Dreeg and Aspect of the Guardian. Dreeg's Evil Eye and modifiers rebalance based on the addition of crit bonus for dots, higher spirit damage bonus, and more powerful synergies with the mastery. In other words, Dreeg's Evil Eye got better. It may be one of the best abilities in the game. Right now, I'd have to test it out first. Focus Gaze updated with percent total damage multiplier. Again, Dreeg's Evil Eye may have become really, really awesome. It was awesome before, but it might now be really, really awesome. Okay, Curse of Frailty. Movement speed reduction now scales from 25 to 50% with rank rather than being fixed, which is nice. Vulnerability resistance reduction decreased. DA reduction increased. I guess that balances that out a bit. Soleil's Witchfire added attack speed and vitality damage, removed offensive ability and acid damage. Second Right replaced energy burn with flat vitality damage, added vitality resistance, moved vitality damage to the base skill. So I'm torn about this because Soleil's, like, I don't mind it becoming more vitality based, because before that change, Soleil's was more of like an all-encompassing buff for everything Occultist. And now I think it's more like Chaos Vitality, and I think I'm fine with that, in all honesty. Rather than have it be like, oh, you're just always going to use it for every single Occultist build because it affects all damage types. Now it's just pretty much like Chaos Vitality. So if you're not using those damage types, you could probably take a little pass on it. Consecrated Blade is now just conversion, which I'm fine with as well. Hellhound, innate damage scaling reduced, shifted a little more toward fire. This should be made up for by skill increases. And Hellhound, they changed the way the Hellhound looks. They updated its mesh, and it looks like they're just adding on chaos damage and increasing its fire damage a little bit. So I'd say the Occultist, all in all, is better than it was before. Yeah, I would definitely say it got a nice buff, all in all. So, Nightblade. Shadow Strike can now teleport through enemies. Huge bonus. Cooldown increased to 3.5 seconds and damage increased. So, the reason they increased the cooldown of Shadow Strike is you could actually get it to 0 seconds cooldown before this change. And that made it basically one of the best melee abilities in the game, because you could just keep just keep Shadow Striking things over and over and over again. So, they had to obviously change that to balance it out and make it not stupidly unfair. Nadala's Justifiable ends reduce cooldown reduction scaling by 25% by rank 12, 30% by max ultimate rank. Again, that's the reason, is to get Shadow Strike away from just zero seconds on it. So Lethal Gambit's gone. They took Amaresta's Blade Burst and made it the main skill. So when it's still a skill on cooldown, and every time it procs, it does the Amaresta's Blade Burst thing. And now the modifier is called Lethal Assault, and it adds flat acid damage, which is interesting, to the attack, and has a bunch of percents based around it as well. So we'll see how that works. I think I might actually test it out on a couple characters, just to see if Amaresta's Blade Burst is worth picking up and using as a left click ability. So, Blade Spirit. Shower of Blades now launches a fixed 6 projectiles at all ranks, but the blades pierce through all enemies. On expiration, the Blade Spirit deals area damage around it rather than launching a burst of blades. Added cold damage to the Blade Spirit's innate aura to compensate for the loss of huge burst potential it had previously. I guess that's kind of a buff. Or no, kind of a balance, I would say. Anatomy Murder. Reduced percent bonus to humans to 33%. Okay, yeah, Anatomy Murder, whatever. Blade Trap. Radius now scales with level, duration, and cooldown increased by 0.5 seconds. Percent defensive ability reduction lowered. Whatever. Heartseeker. Energy cost reduced. Vitality damage starts lower, but scales higher. That's a buff. Nether Edge. Energy cost reduced. Chaos damage increased slightly. Spread reduced. Cold damage reduced a little. Balance. Frenetic Throw. Pierce to Vitality conversion reduced from 50 to 45%. Minus 10% crit damage added. Why nerf it even more? Whatever. Pneumatic Burst removed weapon requirement. Awesome. Transmuter still requires dual melee weapons. Pneumatic Burst can be used with pistols and rifles now, and two-handers and all sorts of... eyelash? Okay, and all sorts of... just all of the weapons in the game can use Pneumatic Burst. Big, big benefit. Because, man, dual-wielding pistols and still having Pneumatic Burst sounds awesome. Hell, just using a pistol with a shield or a pistol with a caster offhand with Pneumatic Burst, like, that's a big bonus just to all pistol users that want to go into Nightblade. And yeah, the Transmuter still requiring dual melee weapons is totally fine by me. That Transmuter is awesome, and putting a good requirement on that, makes sense. All in all, Nightblade, I would probably say technically it's a nerf. But it's a nerf to something that really actually needed to be nerfed down. Other stuff is like just balancing things. And I guess ultimately I'd probably say it's gonna be a buff. Just because Pneumatic Burst can be used with pistols now. So Arcanist, Aether Ray, slightly increased turn speed. Now, I've obviously used the Aether Ray last night. Played around with it. That, to me, I don't think it actually increased your casting speed / proc rate. I think it just increased the... Maybe it did. I don't know. To me, it was just seeming like it sucked out more energy. Wasn't really dealing much more damage quicker. I mean, it's not anything... It's not really any huge change. It just means you have to manage your energy a little better. Disintegration, slightly increased fire damage, and Aether bonuses. Not going to argue there. Devastation, cooldown reduced from 20 seconds to 18 seconds. I'm definitely not arguing with that. Mirror Varactes, increased the cooldown and energy cost at all ranks. That sucks, but it's 3 seconds. It's not going to matter, in all honesty. Because if you're using it as a one-pointer, like... it already took a really long time to recharge, and if you have it at 12, I mean, you're probably already running a lot of cooldown reduction anyways. So, I believe with, say, my Albrecht's Aether Ray character right now, he has, I think, 20%. Let's say you spitball about 30% cooldown reduction. That's 1 second difference. Because when it was 15 seconds, that reduces it to 10 seconds. Here, that reduces it to 12. So, 2 second difference. Not a huge difference there, in all honesty. So, that's a nerf technically, but it's not a big one. Energy cost on that skill is, it's pointless anyways. Kalidor's Tempest, slightly increased max fire damage and % weapon damage with rank. Big buff there. Radius now starts lower, but scales with rank to a larger size. Kalidor's Tempest got a huge buff. Huge, awesome buff. Now you can actually make it bigger. It's not a huge increase. I think it's 0.1 meters per level, 0.1 meters per rank, but still, it's going to scale better, and in the end, it's going to be bigger and hit harder. Definitely a good buff there. Inferno, slightly increased Aether damage with rank. Another little buff. Wrath of Agravax, increased weapon damage bonus to 50%. I think that's up from 30%. I think it was like 30, 33, something like that. So, Kalidor's Tempest, all over the place, is all around better and more awesome. Definitely brought that skill up to, like, even just reading it on paper, it definitely seems like it brought it on par with Aether Ray and Panetti's. Well, okay, not really, but it definitely made it viable, or more viable now, as it's a standalone ability. Because Panetti's is ridiculous, and Albrecht's Aether Ray can get ridiculous. So Kalidor's Tempest is now much, much better. Seer Protection. Absorption reduced to 20% by rank 12, 25% by rank 22. % all damage skills less at ultimate ranks. Added a small physical damage reduction that is reduced at ultimate ranks. That's technically a little bit of a nerf, but Maven Sphere is just so good it doesn't matter, in all honesty. And that tiny bit of physical damage is really tiny. It's like 5%. I don't even think it's anything to worry about. given how much percentages of damage you throw around. But that's just to sort of discourage, or at least put a little penalty in for hybridizing. So if you're a battle mage and you're doing like a force wave or a cadence build that still is basically a physical damage build, and you just wanted sphere protection for sphere protection, Arcanist for sphere of protection, that's why that exists. So, mental alacrity, casting speed bonus reduced. For a 10-point passive was giving too much, and there is now more spread bonuses and other. So here's the thing about mental alacrity. It wasn't giving too much. I don't even think it was giving enough. Because mental alacrity, you generally stop it at 8 or 9. Because, like, I stop it at 9. And that's with plus skills. The skill is a borderline one-pointer that you use plus skills to get up to higher levels. It's like you don't even invest points in it, in all honesty. Because level 9 is the last time you get skill cost reduction with the cast speed bonus. So it's like, after that, it just is such a high amount of diminishing returns. I don't understand why they'd reduce it even further. So our Arcanist got, like it needed one, a buff, in my opinion. It got a buff in its... It got a buff as an Arcanist, not as a dip class. As a dip class, I'd say it got nerfed. But if you're using Arcanist abilities, that's definitely a buff. Shaman got nothing. Significantly increased threat scaling with Ground Slam. Same thing with Emberclaw I mentioned before. Devouring Storm, bleed damage increased, bleed resistance reduction reduced, life leech reduced, whatever. Wendigo Totem, healing at rank 10, adjusted to 5% plus 500, 8%, whatever. And Feral Hunger, slightly increased bleed. Like, I think the Shaman is probably the weakest of the trees right now. At least to me, it seems like it. I think they need to buff it in various places to me. I don't know. It just... If we were to tier all of the classes, it'd be like Soldier and Arcanist are on top. Demolitionist, Nightblade are in the middle. Occultist and Shaman just... Maybe Occultist is a little higher now, but... Like, to me, like... The Shaman just... I don't know. I've never been impressed by it. Well, I've been impressed by it. It's hard to put the words without, like, a piece of criticism without sounding too negative. Because it does work, and its abilities are good. But... to me, the other classes just feel so much stronger. Especially in the late game. In the late game, like, if you were a Conjurer or even a Elementalist, it feels like a struggle as you go through Elite. And I can't even imagine taking an Elementalist in the Ultimate still. A Conjurer I could see, but they'd be a pet build. I'm actually a little, like... I was kind of hoping the Shaman would actually gotten more. But, yeah, just 4 tiny little adjustments to it. I don't know. I just don't know. You know, I think I'm actually going to split playing the game into a separate video because we're at the 40-minute mark. But anyways, itemization. So, what's going on with items? I think Sino mentioned this last night, was they're kind of tweaked a little bit because of the way Devotion was tweaked. But there are a lot of like little changes here and there, and you can really go in and read them in the changelog on the forum. I'm not going to really go into everything. A lot of what's been changed is mostly based around adding defensive ability and offensive ability to things. And I don't really... And, like, so, like, Devil Tongue added +1 Hellfire Mine, like, stuff that is related to the other changes. And, I mean, there are certain things, like Fate Weaver's Mantle, they replaced the energy with % elemental resistance, which is awesome. And a lot of things just got straight up... Like, if they had energy before, that was removed and replaced with other stuff. And they're also changing around attack speed, because that's the other big thing. I kind of skipped over it. Attack speed has gotten hugely nerfed. To the point where it's probably going to change a lot of builds that heavily relied on it, because it's being just taken off of items and it's now multiplicative with weapon attacks. So they're definitely pulling back on what attack speed provides a character. But yeah, there are certain things like leg plants of the leg wraps of the tranquil mind replace energy with percent aether res. So it's like, yeah, that's awesome. That's a great change. But yeah, if you look like Mantle of Dreeg, Mark of Dark Omens, they just got defensive ability. Yeah, Mark of the Apostate replaced energy with percent chaos res. Because energy really is not a great stat in terms of itemization. So yeah, it's like Northern Worm, I don't even remember what that is, but cast speed increased, removed energy. Nadala's Leg Wraps, added defensive ability. Statue of the Immortal Sage, increased defensive ability. Shadowflame Mantle, added defensive ability, replaced fire res with cold res, added small radius to projectiles on skill. Silverbolt, added attack speed. Like, that's actually adding attack speed. But yeah, it's like, look, Valdoon's set, I haven't even seen it, and it's added defensive ability to pretty much everything. And there have been other changes. So, like, Warp Fire now has an increased conversion on its cold to fire. They reduced the resistance reduction on it, but they added fire and aether damage to the proc on it. So, yeah, some things are changed. I don't know if it's for the better. It feels kind of... But yeah, if you look, it's like replaced energy with something else, replaced energy regen, added offense ability, added defense ability, replaced energy with offense ability, replaced energy with elemental res, replaced energy regen with health regen, replaced energy with energy regen, added defense ability, added offensive ability. So it's like, it's very much adding into offense and defensive ability while sort of sucking out energy as a stat, because it's not actually a great stat on gear, in all honesty. And likewise, they did some tweaking to the relics as well. I don't know that there's anything... the big one that I'm interested in is the Blade Masters and Blade Dancers. They made it so it's like, added elemental damage and offensive ability, removed attack speed. So Blade Dancer's Talisman is now for, like, say, Warrior Mages. So, like, yeah, they did some tweaking like that. I think the big one is... Oblivion, they removed the resistance reduction, so now it's not like the go-to for a relic. I don't know. I don't really see any major changes on the items that are like, oh man, look at that, that's awesome now. It's a lot of little changes. Little changes here and there that generally seem to make the items like tweaked better for what the game is now. But yeah, that covers all of the changes to Grim Dawn. Well, all the major changes to Grim Dawn in Build 31. So thanks for watching, everyone. Stay tuned for the next video, which is going to be looking at new old Arcavia stuff. And I'll see you guys then.